Hafide Action PAC Familia, Hafide Guam, and Hafide voters. Welcome to another episode of the We Want to Know Action PAC Show. I'm your host, as always, Phil Leddy, the Executive Director. And it's not about me, it's about our special guest candidate today. She is former senator and your current senatorial candidate, seeking one of your votes in the upcoming November 8th general election. I have with me my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sam Mabini Young. Hafide.
Hafide. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Action PAC, for always welcoming me to your show.
Absolutely. I mean, the ideas that we're able to bounce off one another and really see your vision for Guam moving forward. I think it's always been a pleasure personally, but also to our viewers. So we're definitely happy and excited to have you on yet again. And before we jump into our questions, I'm just going to introduce the PAC as I typically do. The Action PAC was formed out of a need to play an active role in government beginning at the grassroots level. Action PAC comprises members from a cross-section of Guam society, representing all walks of life and united in our belief that we can effect change through action. As always, we welcome you to get to know us better, and we hope to continue doing our part and using our platform to help you get to know our candidates and future lawmakers better. So with that said, before we jump into the first question, Dr. Sam Mabini Young, do you have any welcoming remarks, ma'am?
Well, thank you. I just want to wish everybody half a day and belated happy Halloween, and also All Saints Day and All Souls Day tomorrow. And also, before I start, I really want to encourage everybody to please play your part and go out and vote. And when you do, please consider me. I'm number 11 on the Republican side of the ballot. My name is Shirley, or Sam Mabini Young. And this is the second time I am hoping to serve the island of Guam through the Guam legislature. I served in the 31st Guam legislature. I'd like to serve again in this 37th. And I'd like to continue my work in workforce development and other areas. And for one thing, the area that I think we all are craving for, demanding, is a smarter and smaller government. So this time around, I really want to focus on looking at what kind of a part-time legislature would work for Guam, and also to increase efficiency and accountability from our GovGuam departments. I also really want to help work with my fellow senators, also the executive branch and the judiciary, in dealing with our drug issues on Guam, and also to look at how we can really adopt innovative, affordable housing so that we can get our families into safe homes. And then last but not least, again, going back to my passion, which is workforce development this time. And I'll elaborate more with your questions, Phil. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. You're definitely touching all of the hot points for the PAC, but also for our community at that. And it was so surprising. Again, this is my first foray really into the political arena, but more research, more conversations, and really diving into being the executive director for this political action committee really got me in tune. And it was so mind-blowing for me to know and be informed that our small island has just about 51 government agencies. I was like, wow, that is a huge number. And I'm also interested, once we get to that point of the conversation, to hear your perspective of a part-time legislature. That is one of the PAC initiatives, and it's always been a coin flip when I ask it to candidate, regardless of what side. And I think it really comes down to what's the interpretation, because on the surface it might seem like you're only doing half of the job, but that's not really what I or the Action PAC intends when we put that as an initiative. So I'm looking forward to that part of our conversation. With that said, you kind of touched base on it, and you did give us a scope in our first interview leading up to the primary. Can you please remind our viewers and voters, what are some of your platform pillars?
All right. So I titled them three ways. I'd like a smarter and smaller government, and that would mean the efficiency and accountability of all our GovGuam departments and our workers. And also, on top of having a smarter and smaller government, is having a legislature that is designed to really focus on its main responsibilities. And so I'd like to really tackle a part-time legislature moving forward. Second is I'd like to work on the sense of accountability in our community. working with our agencies, working with our non-government agencies, community-based groups, and so forth, and really tackling the challenges that many of our families face, which is the affordable living or affordable homes. And we know that throughout the United States, or even throughout the world, there are very innovative housing options that are available. We just got to have to figure out what works for our insurance companies and our banks to make it work for the people of Guam, so that our individuals, families, homeless, vulnerable, and elderly community can find a safe home, so that that's what our people deserve. And second, we really need to do an aggressive campaign against the impact of the bad drugs in our community. We see it all the time. Every time I turn on the news, I'm sure we're all fed up with it. We can't keep talking about it. We have to have an aggressive campaign. And last but not least, it's about preparing our workforce. I have been doing this almost all my life. And this time around, I really want to build on supporting our businesses, our educators, and our families, working together to figure out what's the best way to help our students identify the careers that best fit them, and then figure out what pathways they have to take, whether it's some training, a little bit of college, or a lot of college, in order to prepare them for the current and new industries that we have here in Guam and in our region.
Absolutely. It's definitely a tall task where we find ourselves in those times, especially coming post-pandemic. It's going to take that, I would say, proactive approach by those representatives that are granted a seat in the 37th Guam legislature to tackle the current issues. But I love a lot of your approaches because it's talking about the future. How are we setting up Guam for a better future? Because if we keep just worrying about yesterday's issues, we're always going to worry about yesterday's issues. So we got to have foresight as well. So I've always loved that about your approach to serving the local community. With that said, you have some great ideas and great concern points. If you can remind our viewers, and it doesn't have to be the same, maybe throughout the conversation, through this campaign, you decided or thought of a different focus item that you can accomplish. So the question is, what is one main focus item that you believe you can realistically accomplish as a senator in the 37th Guam legislature?
Okay. I believe whether or not we get majority, and of course I want the Republican majority, but I have proven with my colleagues of the 31st Guam legislature that even as a minority, if we were to, unfortunately get a minority group, that we can still work across the aisle to achieve some big, big goals. And one of the areas that I really would like to focus on, and 2 years is really not enough, but it is enough, I believe, to be able to work together with my colleagues in the Senate to look at how our existing structure of our Senate can be reduced, or I shouldn't say reduced, could be modified to accommodate the focus that we need to pay attention to. As a legislator, we are focused on three things. We are supposed to be working on great legislation. We should be approving the confirmation of quality leaders to lead our agencies. And third, it's our budget appropriations. And all of those are all tied together. But that does take a lot of focused work. And so a part-time legislature is a word that goes around, but it is a scary term for some folks who think that, oh no, we need a lot of time in order to be good legislators. And yes, that is true. However, and I know that as a legislator, part of our culture, a lot of the things, extra stuff starts sliding in and maybe distracting us from our major focus. In the United States, there are 10 states that have full-time legislatures, and those senates are serving extremely large populations for their states. We have about 14 states that have part-time legislatures, and those are about the size of Guam, if not a little bit bigger. And then the states in the middle, about 26 states, have what they call hybrid versions. And that's almost like what Guam looks like. We don't call it a part-time legislature, but we are almost fitting that hybrid part-time legislature. The main thing is this: there are certain things in our legislation in Guam that really should be wiped out. For instance, marriage ceremonial duties. I mean, really, that should be handed to some other authorities. Certain requirements to be able to get government vehicles or license plate privileges, those are not needed. We need to focus on maybe a research bureau where graduate students from the university or professionals who have had proven track records in supporting legislators to research and develop quality legislation to help our island move forward. So that's part of the whole concept of a part-time legislature. And also on top of that, you know, and I know that that becoming a public leader, it takes a lot of time and effort, and obviously for many, a lot of money to become a legislator. A part-time legislature, I believe, will allow individuals who are maybe coming from retirement, or even business people, or average workers out there who may want to be able to continue working but serve the people of Guam through the legislature. A part-time legislature format can make this happen. And mainly it's about us focusing on the critical Senate work.
Definitely, and I mean, I'm a huge supporter of that. I actually had a great and thorough conversation with one of my best friends just this past weekend, and and he did not agree with part-time legislature, so I had to, for lack of a better word, sell it to him so he can truly understand what at least the action pack, what I mean when I say a part-time, and it really lines up with how you define it. Because I believe serving the people should be an opportunity that that is not just granted to few, but it should be an opportunity that if someone has some sort of passion or industry knowledge, but they don't have the full time to commit to it, the serving your community, or serving your island or your country, it should not be determined on your career. That's it shouldn't be a career. And I love the fact, because when you're talking about utilizing college students or a research department, I think that'll also spark their interest to possibly serve in the future. So it's almost like farming the future leaders while giving them that knowledgeable approach and then passing the torch. And I think that's certain, not just Guam, but just if you look at the Senate in the United States, a lot of them are, you're talking about lifelong lawmakers, and more power to them. But at the same token, if you're just serving in that capacity and you're not actually stepping out into the real world as an entrepreneur or as an industry professional, aren't you out of touch? If you haven't had to actually run a business and be delicate with a budget that determines if people have a job or not, aren't you out of touch? I don't know. That's just, again, that's me speaking on my behalf. That's a personal opinion.
You know, you hit it right in the head of the nail. The other area other than private sector is having work in a public sector agency where you really get to understand the nuts and the bolts of the challenges of budgeting, managing staff, and so forth. Having that experience, which I know I have, and many of my colleagues have, and then bringing it back into the legislature, so because we know what it's like, and we know the challenges and barriers, and as a legislator, we're able to help eliminate a lot of those barriers and then create opportunities where they can run a great agency and serve the people of Guam.
I love that. I love that. Real world experience turns into real world action. I'm a firm believer in that. Well, that's a great segue to our final question before we jump into our Action PAC initiatives and seeing where you stand on them. And our final question is the same as the last. Again, your answer might be different from our first conversation, and we welcome just to see where you land on how do you or how will you help our local business community, especially understanding Action PAC is definitely very pro-business, backed by the largest organizations on Guam. As we continue to move past this economic recovery period, especially in a state of high inflation, obviously not all of our businesses are benefiting from the rollback of the BPT. What are some of your ideas, or what is one of your main ideas?
Well, one of the things that I had learned during COVID-19, when I was able to have the privilege of working with SBDC and helping our small businesses deal with and tackle the COVID-19, they're managing their business within that environment. I learned that there are all these little small things that become barriers and become these big hurdles to small businesses to move forward. So one of the things I would love to do is see how our agencies can have more practical and efficient customer service oriented processes, as businesses are either paying their GRT or whatnot. I mean, for instance, it's great when people can do their GRTs online, and that has made great strides, but there's still a lot more. I have business people who are taking the time off just to bring their child over to get their driver's license. They waste a day or two just doing that. I mean, those unnecessary bureaucracy that interferes with their operation, because if they have to do it, their employees are also having to deal with all the unnecessary bureaucracy as they move forward. So automation is another thing. I heard that unfortunately, now that we're post-COVID, I've heard of some entities who are pulling back from the digitized methods that they were using and going back to the old methods. That's ridiculous. It worked, and they may not be as comfortable with it, but we can, as moving forward, we need to make that available and to continue. We have to hold our directors a lot more accountable to ensure that their operations and staff are actually trained to perform the kind of quality services that we're expecting from them. So holding them accountable, reviewing their budgets, that's one of the roles that we as senators do when it comes to the budget process. We actually review not only just the numbers, but actually the performance, their staffing. And we need to look at those and see and justify because it's not about revenue that they need to run their operations. It's also about cost cutting measures. I also want to promote stronger private and public partnerships to improve services. We've seen that happen in a few agencies. I helped develop that for the rev tax when it came to driver's license testing. People were waiting over a year to get their testing, and then working with my fellow legislators, we passed a bill and we were able to outsource those testing, and it took within days or weeks. So from waiting a whole year to just 1 week, just because one legislation allowed that. So again, I mentioned digitizing and streamlining services. And how about forecasting budgets for more than 1 year? And then so that we can do a better job at budgeting. So the goal is to get the economy moving. The other thing I would love to do to help our business community respond to the economic recovery is, again, going back to my passion about workforce development. We know that there are a lot of services that are out there, but there's a lot of red tape. Having worked at Department of Labor, I saw where a lot of those red tapes are. We need to get those out of the way and allow our businesses to access those benefits, whether they're coming from Department of Labor or Guam Economic Development Authority. We need to be able to support that. And last but not least, I really would love to see more of our schools partnering very, very closely with our businesses so that we can identify what is the best way to get our students to identify what jobs are out there, what would be a good fit for them, and what kind of training and education they would need to get there. So those are some of the ideas that I have.
All winners in my book. I mean, automation, there's so much proof of concepts, like you mentioned earlier. I mean, there's different cities or municipalities which are very in line as far as comparable with our population and the demands of our island, who are living in 2022. And it just seems that and I do understand. I mean, when you do any massive rollout, especially for a large agency or a government agency, private corporations, so on and so forth, there is that learning curve and there is that initial pushback. But if it is explained and trained in a manner where the employee understands that their lives will be much more fluid, as well as the end user will benefit, which means end user satisfaction skyrockets, thus resulting in less complaints and less hard days at the office. I think it obviously makes the process more smooth, and people aren't waiting 4 hours outside under canopies at DMV.
Yes.
Also B, you're able to look at these employees who, for lack of a better term, have been forced to just be paper pushers, and you're able to actually explore the skills that they've had this whole time that they've never been allowed to showcase, explore, and then utilize within the government agency that they're working in. I believe there are many diamonds in the rough in all government agencies that unfortunately are constrained by the long, old, outdated processes of their agency.
Absolutely. And we can't forget that gas is so expensive. If I have to drive up to one agency or another, I mean, look how much money I would save if I were able to take care of that online. And there are some agencies that have done a better job than others. Let's learn from them and use those best practices. Another thing is that before COVID-19, only about 7% of businesses in the nation were doing telebusiness or telework. Today, it's up to 67 and climbing percent. We showed that we could do it, and Zoom was one example. Not everybody wants to always be staring at each other on the computer, but the reality is time is money, and time is precious. We need time with our family. We need time, to make money. We need time in our community. And so let's streamline things so that we can, make our money work smarter for us.
The old age adage, right? Work harder, not smarter. Let's see that.
Yeah.
Let's see that as we roll into 2023. All right, great. Well, we made it to the point in the interview where it's new for this conversation, because we are rolling into the general election. So we, as a PAC, we would be remiss if we didn't have our own initiatives. So of course we have initiatives that are very important and current to us, and initiatives like in all organizations, they would be adjusted or pivoted as new concerns arise. But currently we have 5 initiatives as the Action PAC. I will go down these initiatives one at a time and give you the opportunity to agree, disagree, or elaborate. The funny and great part is, in a lot of your conversation today and your explanations of where you are and where you stand, you almost answered all of them. So that's amazing. Talk about a proactive mind. We will start with number 1. Very important to us. The Action PAC was the front runner to establishing that conversation of the business privilege tax rollback. We are very thankful to the 36 Guam legislature, as well as the current administration, to hearing our concerns. And they did roll back the BPT for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, per their statistic. Anyone that was grossing less than 500,000, they are currently experiencing a reduction in their business privilege tax. We are thankful that we were able to come to that compromise, but our fight is not over. We want to continue to advocate for all businesses, because I've had many conversations with what would be considered small or medium-sized businesses, and they're like, 500,000 is not much when you're talking about operational expense, when you're talking about shipping, when you're talking about the rate of inflation we find ourselves in. So even those businesses would not have the opportunity to experience the rollback that is currently in place. So our number 1 initiative, rollback of the BPT from 5 to 4 or less immediately across the board. Agree, disagree, or elaborate. I knew it. There we go. That's a winner in our book. Number 2, advocate for government efficiency to protect and preserve its resources.
I said that earlier.
Yes. I know. I'm telling you, you're knocking all of these out earlier. Number 3 is improve the transparency at all levels of the government of Guam and promote open communication and collaboration between the public and private sector. I heard that earlier. Now, this one we might not have touched on. Strengthen the relations with the U.S. military to improve safety and security in our region. That's the focus. But taking advantage and maximizing the economic opportunities for Guam.
The answer is yes. And I wanted to just elaborate really quickly here. We know that it is the other industry other than tourism, and we saw what COVID-19 did and what industry we had to depend on to keep this engine going in our community. The reality is we are the tip of the spear. We play a major role in the security of our nation, and I'm proud of that. And we do need to work closely to make sure that there's some parity between inside and outside the gate. Yes, but at the end of the day, they are the ones who will be providing the jobs, the resources, the peripheral benefits of having them on island. We just have to continue working together to make sure that, like I said, that there's parity between inside and outside the gate. I am so excited to hear about all the economic opportunities and the job opportunities. We just got to figure out, what are those jobs? Are they digital related jobs? Are they maintenance related jobs? So that we can get our schools aware of that and figure out what kind of training and education we need. We can't keep saying college is a path, because we are learning in the nation. Unfortunately, Phil, I just came from a conference in Nashville where I met with other fellow researchers and leaders, and it is a major concern. We know, and I was surrounded by university professors and university presidents, and they are also aware that we need to do a better job in helping send that message that students, let's figure out what you want to do, what are the career opportunities, and let's make that match, and let's help train you or educate you the best way possible. So yes, let's strengthen our relationship with the U.S. military.
I love it. I'm just going to touch on that in 2 points. The first one, as a father of 4, I firmly support and believe that we need to start sparking that imagination, but just a topic of conversation from you, not just the high school, but I firmly believe at the middle school level. we should start having more workshops, more internships, more apprenticeships, more career days, so on and so forth. That's one of the reasons why we started the Guam Contractors Emerging Leaders, which I currently chair, is really to have that outreach, because my daughter was a guest at the Pizza Pop and Power Toast that the GCA throws every summer, and it's all girls working
Yeah,
for
I was
plumbing,
there.
welding. Oh my goodness, she had a blast. I think she was the last one. She just wanted to keep welding. But it sparked it, and it's probably something that she would have never thought was interesting had she not had the opportunity and had private private and public partnerships were established to offer the opportunity to our island young females. So I really firmly believe that we need to start really forecasting or allowing the younger demographic to have that imagination, the seed planted. Because the worst thing is you graduate high school and you have no plan, and you're like, okay, what do I do? Military or college, which is the typical case growing up here on island. So I love
Exactly.
that. And number
Yes,
two,
and Phil, before
yes,
you,
absolutely.
public law 3180 is the law that I wrote. It was a career information delivery system, actually pushing that career exploration as early as middle school. So it is in the books, and I know our schools are working hard to try to implement it as early as middle school. Our teachers do need the support to be able to make this happen. But yep, we're all in line.
I love it. I love it. And the second point I wanted to touch on the topic of the U.S. military. I would say a few of the candidates, to include one of the teams that I've interviewed for the gubernatorial seat. One of their concerns about the rollback of the BPT for all businesses was that we wouldn't capture stateside big mega companies who are coming to Guam, winning $150 million bids, and we wouldn't capture their full 5%, which in the person's term, or the people's term, was that would be leaving free money on the table. Do you have a point of view on that? If we roll back completely, then that means even these stateside huge organizations would be getting a tax break as well.
So I look at it two ways. So whenever I hear BPT, or the average person hears BPT, we think of tax, we think of the revenue that's being pulled in. I always like to look at the other side of the coin to kind of see, and that's where I went. I'm going to go back to one of my platform topics, which is holding our agencies accountable, having a smarter and smaller government. So we got to look at the cost savings measures here, so we're not so dependent on that 4 or 5%. That's one. Second is that these businesses that are coming here have the capacity, have the resources to be able to set up shop and provide the jobs and resources here in Island. And so we have to look at both sides of the picture. Moving forward, maybe we do need to go back in and look at how we may be able to capture some of those. But and I know that that the jobs that the career opportunities that they bring to the island is tremendous. What I'd love to see is work closely more with them in having them participate in supporting the training, so they're not necessarily bringing off island professionals or skilled individuals, but actually building them and developing them here in Guam.
Absolutely. And in my capacity at the Guam Contractors Association, I firmly have felt a huge promise as far as partnership and commitment to the partnership with our local workforce, as well as our local leaders. So that's always been my response. It was just interesting hearing a certain candidates' responses, and then also hearing a point of view like yours, which is very much in line with the way I see things. Excellent. So we've made it to our last initiative. This is always a coin flip, but you've really touched on it, and it's actually part of your platform, the support of a part-time legislature.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it.
And it's not always way up in the front, and that's because it will take a lot of work. And I always want to build on what I'm most passionate about, and that's always workforce development. But it's right up there. It's let's look at how we can encourage a new generation of leaders into the Senate with a part-time legislature format that works for Guam. There are hybrid forms that we can design so that people who do serve, well, first off, we attract those who can, and allow them to be able to come in with those opportunities and stay focused on what we were hired to do.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And should the island see fit that you will gain your seat in the 37th Guam legislature, I personally am looking forward to working very closely with you with the workforce development aspect, and I know we will. So that brings us to the close of another episode. Once again, viewer and voter, I always ask, and this is a personal request of mine, put your family and personal bias aside. Don't base it off of Facebook. Don't base it off of a campaign promise or a billboard that you see on the side of the streets. Listen to interviews such as our podcast. Listen back to the interviews, maybe even the ones in the primary for the candidates that made it through to the general, and other interviews from the multiple media outlets. But come to a conscious and clear conclusion on who you feel really has Guam's best interest moving forward, who is playing party politics, and who is putting you before their own aspirations. I always come to that realization. I share personally that when I vote for the candidates who I feel have the interest of the Guam I want my children to inherit. And I think that's very important, to get out of that numbness of Guam politics where you vote because grandma told you to vote this way, or you vote down the line because, oh, I think I'm related to that person. Let's stop that. I think that's the old way. I think we're marching forward to a really, really beautiful future, but we need those strong and capable leaders to move us into that progress. So again, I want to thank Dr. Sam Mabini Young, one of the candidates vying for one of your 15 votes, and in this election being general. You are able, let's say you classify yourselves as a Democrat. That's awesome. You are able to jump to the other side and vote, and vice versa. So vote for who you really have confidence in, not based off of party. But if your party is strong and you believe in all of their things, then by all means, we don't tell you how to vote. We just want you to vote. So the early election is still going on for 2 more days. This was recorded on the 1st of November. It ends on the 3rd of November at the West End. The actual election date is on November 8th. And I would be remiss if I did not give our lovely guest a chance to give a closing remark and reminding everyone where you can find her on the ballot.
Thank you, Bill. Again, thank you, Action PAC. My name is Shirley Sam Mabini Young. I am number 11 on the Republican side of the ballot. And I encourage you to please come out and vote. And tell your family and your friends, your neighbors, remind them that they have the privilege, the right, the honor to be able to come out and vote for people that you believe in. And I do have a website, www.senatormabini.com. I encourage you to go to my website, go to my Facebook page, and check out the information. It tells a little bit about my history, my platform, and even links to these recordings. So I encourage everybody to please go out there and vote. And don't forget number 11, Shirley Sam Mabini Young. Si Diyos Maasi, maraming salamat po. Thank you, everybody.
Dr. Sam, it's always been a pleasure. I appreciate your presence, your time, your interview, and your candor, and your honesty. I mean, there are many candidates that I have the privilege of speaking to that I feel off the bat, hearing them and hearing their answers, they're not so robotic. They're really speaking from their heart. And I think that's why it's so important for for our voters to continue to listen to and gather as much information before they hit the polls. So with that said, again, early voting is active. November 8th is when you show up if you did not make it to the early voting. And I do want to remind everyone out there that Action PAC has a free voting van. Use our gas to cast your vote. Gather 10 to 15 of your coworkers, your family members, hey, maybe a senior citizen center or whatnot, and give us a call or shoot us an email, and we will schedule to pick you up and bring you down to the early voting or bring you to the polls on November 8th. Just another way that we're trying to use our platform and our partners to exhaust multiple ways to help you cast your vote, because it is that important. You can reach us at takeactionguam@gmail.com, or you can reach me directly at 777-0240. It's been a pleasure, Guam. This is another episode of the We Want to Know Action PAC Show. Make your voice be heard on November 8th. Adios.